So we're doing our discussion on Immanuel Kant, and obviously we haven't covered him in the book, so we won't have any questions for you right away, but about halfway down the page you'll see a longer quote that he had in one of his books, so I want you guys to just keep that quote in mind for later on. We'll discuss it. So a little background information on Kant. He was born April 22nd, 1724, and died February 12th, 1804. He was born in Königsberg, Prussia, and he pretty much didn't travel within 10 miles of that place his entire life. And he attended Königsberg University at age 16, where he spent the rest of his career. He lived a very strict and predictable life, is what people would say, and that's because he always followed a strict schedule, like to the T. Whatever he did, he always did it at the same time every day. So his neighbors actually joked that like they would set their clocks to when he would walk on his daily walk, because it was just every single day, you know, Kant's going to be out there walking down the street. So going into freedom, his philosophical works, two of the works he wrote were the Critique of Practical Reasoning and the Critique of Pure Reasoning. And basically they come up to say, like, are humans truly free because of how we think? And I can't believe that acting out of morality is wrong, because, for instance, today, robbing someone, like, we would consider that wrong, that's morally wrong, and that's against the law, but that's, in his mind, that's not an act of freedom, because this act had happened in the past. Like, theft was in his mind because there had either been a robbery in the past, or he had heard of someone robbing, so with that thought already in his mind isn't free to think about that idea. So his mind doesn't have complete freedom on that topic. And so getting into the quote, does anyone want to read the quote for me?
Because we can't read.
Any volunteers?
Miss Daggers,
All
how
right,
about you?
Mr. Toot, can you read the quote for us?
Certainly, one may say, freedom to speak or write can be taken from us by superior power, but never the freedom to think. But how much and how correctly would we think if we did not think, as it were, in common with others with whom we mutually communicate?
Alright, so how do you guys feel about that quote? Do you guys agree, disagree with it? Any thoughts?
For sure, it's not people in here reading, but a cohesive idea together here.
I know you don't. How do you feel about it?
I think he's completely right. How many times in history have you seen an oppressive regime just take away, books, take away basically everything, and people still revolt, people still rise up, because you can't take away inherent rights, you can't take away the right to think.
Exactly. So, I mean, at the same time you have your own way of thinking, it's probably based off of someone else's way of thinking for you. So,
going off of that, you might say that maybe like an ideology maybe can be used to take away, like when they press their ideology on young children. Maybe that could be taken away, because they only are being taught what their superiors want them to do.
Exactly. And like, what happens if you think opposite of what everyone else is thinking? You know what I mean?
You get killed.
Yeah, you're not going to be included, especially with the government at that time. So,
another
another hand, Graham.
I kind of find this quote interesting because it kind of begs the question, like, can there be such a thing as, like, individual creative thought if everything is kind of based on either, thoughts before you, or based on basically the communal thoughts of the time?
And that's exactly what Kant's getting at. He's just saying, are your thoughts free? Are you freely acting from within yourself, or are you acting based off of past things that have actually happened? So your thoughts aren't actually free to yourself, so that's exactly what he's getting at. And I was going to say, just to go off of that, people that speak outside of that, they could sound uneducated, or today you might think of them as a philosopher if they were thinking crazy thoughts that are outside of everyone else's thinking. So it's re-emphasizing that it's, if we think morally on what we ought to do, the ideas of morality, we're not truly thinking freely, and therefore, do we have true freedom, you know? So. And then just getting into the Western tradition of freedom to think, kind of like we were just discussing now. Basically, do people think freely for themselves on ideas of the government, like who you vote for or what laws you choose to vote for? Are you thinking freely, or are you thinking off of what someone else already thought, and you're just voicing your opinion based off what they already said? And then that leads us into deficiency of reason.
Which is kind of what I'm talking about. First thing is pure reason is limited. He says that you can draw the pure reason as a significant knowledge, but you can't. Kant says that you cannot actually have pure reason tell you about what things are. You can derive significant ideas, but you can't derive exactly what the object is. Second thing is reason has been used to develop the world. The issue with reason is creating ideas and thoughts is that they are completely subjective and therefore open to interpretation. We kind of got off the ground case that whenever you think of something, someone else has already thought of that, and therefore you are basing your thoughts off of the original idea, such as robbery or theft. Someone has already robbed something, so now you are thinking of that. Reason cannot create boundaries of life, it can only really define them. You cannot exactly say for sure what exactly everything is. Kant argues that knowledge is not only the end of reason, but in its practical use, reason addresses our role within the world, stating that we can't define anything, but it just tells us what our role in life is. Another big quote that Kant has is what can I know, what must I do, and what may I hope? It's kind of his answer is he's trying to figure out what his interests are in life. What can you know? I guess, what can you know for sure that is not open to basically any subjective ideas? It's a question for any floor people. Toss them out.
Can you repeat
The quote is like, what can I know, what must I do, and what may I hope? And my question is like, what of those three things, what can you tell me about them? Like, what can you know for sure? What must you do in your life? And what can you hope for in your life? Yeah, great.
Well, just in terms of Kant's philosophy, that first question, what can I know, he would probably argue you can only know what people before you have said and what basically the ideas of the time are. Like, you can only know what in terms of your community and what your predecessors have already discovered and said.
Yeah. So he goes on to state that he cannot actually define anything that he knows. He knows what he must do in life. He's doing it as he's teaching, and he's trying to understand things and understand reasoning and that thoughts behind it. He knows what he can hope for in God and kind of like an afterlife, heavenly place to go live after you die. But he cannot actually answer what can I know. The second, other part is knowledge would corrupt practical reasoning. He states that imposing an external incentive for moral action, stating that if you can reason to what's going to happen in the future, you've actually completely destroyed the future, because everything would be based off of a moral incentive trying to further your position in life and achieve some higher living or higher heaven, basically. And the last thing is peaceful order is only possible if an unaccountable sovereign power overhauls all the members of society. And Kant actually draws this from Hobbes and states that it's out of the idea that incomplete reason and a failure of a belief, and Kant says a failure of belief in God, will lead to basically disarray and a failure of human civilization. And the only way out of that would be if there was some superior sovereign power, basically one leader to kind of unite everyone. And that you would only be able to regain control if you had one leader or a definition of reason or one simple solid belief that everyone can understand and
just to add, just like his idea of thought, it was kind of, he based it off of his learnings back in college, where he learned of like Newton's law, like cause and effect, or action and reaction. That's kind of this idea of where if something happened in the like previously, it's going to happen again just because it's in your mind. So it's been thought, and it could happen again. If you guys have any questions.